Hello everyone, welcome back to our fifth lesson in the concept of the mechanisms of evolution. And this brings us to mechanism number 5. The last one here, mutations. So when we look at mutations, right, hopefully you've heard these before coming up in genetics, right? Just mutations by definition. Really any random change in a gene and anything that's genetic info based, right? Genetic information, any kind of genetic molecule. So that's changing the gene pool, and this could be due to a variety of random chance events. So we could see mutations occurring within multiple processes. We could see them in DNA replication, we can see them in protein synthesis, we can see them in mitosis and meiosis, especially with whole chromosomes or parts of chromosomes. We really see mutations occurring in a variety of ways. And any time that happens, any time that anything here, let's just plug this in right now. Genetic diversity / variation, right? Anytime we see mutations happening, we're going to see more genetic diversity, more variation occurring, right? We're just going to see more options sprouting up, popping up, right? There's just more mutations, more alleles, more options in that gene pool. So hopefully this as a general concept isn't too new, given a background in genetics. But when we get to the mechanisms of evolution and we look at mutations as an evolutionary mechanism, just the randomness here and just their ability to happen at so many points whenever, right? Of course we're going to be changing the gene pool over time. Mutations, a lot of times, especially if they're due to environmental exposure of radiation or toxins or pollutants, they just cannot be avoided, or at least even humans haven't figured out a way to avoid them or stop them from happening yet. So if we're looking at the 5 mechanisms, at the very least, we have mutations changing the gene pool, right? Maybe natural selection isn't happening. Maybe sexual selection isn't happening. Maybe gene flow isn't happening. Genetic drift seems maybe a little random or too hard to shut off in terms of its randomness. But mutations, definitely not going anywhere. Very prevalent feature of life on Earth, just can't be avoided. So because of this, they're definitely an evolutionary mechanism, definitely changing the gene pool over time. So let's take a look at a sample test question here and just see how this could be operating. You see this on a test or how it could be framed here. So let's start with the question, right? So yes, they're rare, but most of the time mutations are inheritable, right? They are of the germline a lot of times. So if you're surviving and reproducing, right, think back to natural selection, your mutations are probably being passed along in the gene pool. So due to mutations, the population is evolving. So the question here is really asking, how can they change the gene pool? How is this possible? How does this occur? This is actually really open-ended. There's a lot of possibilities here. So let's just go, we could be looking for a number of things. Let's just start going through the answer options and see what works. So during DNA replication, DNA polymerase fails to proofread. Now we have a mutation. And now we get a different amino acid. We could get a different protein from this. Could have a totally different trait or, functional enzyme coming out of this. So A is totally possible. But let's look at B. Before we commit to A, let's look at B. Okay, we got radiation. We mutated some germline genes. We got some sex cells being changed here. And then that person who was mutated in their germline genes is reproducing with a lot of people or individuals, right? Not necessarily humans. Okay, so B is possible. Let's take a look at C. Oh, prion disease. So if you're not familiar with what prions are, they're a mutated protein-based disease. Biggest, most well-known example is mad cow disease. If you've heard of mad cow disease, that's from misfolded proteins. So this person doesn't know they have it. They reproduce, they pass it on. They didn't even know they had it, right? They were not symptomatic. So, wow. Okay, these, and here we go. Right, so D actually says all of the above. Are all of these feasibly mutation-based answer options that would be causing the gene pool to change over time? Right? How can mutations change the gene pool of a population? Yeah, it seems like all 3, right? So all the above actually seems like the best answer option here. So that'd be that. So very quickly, right, to wrap things up here, before we get to some more practice, let's just review. So we've now successfully gone through all 5 mechanisms of evolution. Here they are again: natural selection, sexual selection, gene flow, genetic drift, and mutations. They are the 5 mechanisms, or the 5 ways that gene pools actually change, right? This is how evolution happens. Any combination of these 5. So we have survival of the fittest due to surviving and escaping predators, finding food, water, right? Navigating your environment. We got sexual selection, right? Just being chosen to mate with based on preferred behaviors or traits. We have gene flow, immigrating into, emigrating out of gene pools. Genetic drift, we got those 2 effects, but all due to random change, due to random chance events. And mutations, right? At the DNA level, the protein level, the chromosomal level, due to something genetic going wrong in your body or some environmental effect. All of these things, in some combination, change the gene pool over time. So just to conclude here, just a little disclaimer. All 5 mechanisms can be happening all at once at the same time. But when you really look at them big picture here, just a big misconception is that evolution is always a bettering, right? That was very traditional, classical concept that all life forms on Earth get better over time, right? This idea of bettering or meliorism, right? Like improving over time. Maybe, this is kind of what Darwin was born into. This is kind of something he was using natural selection to explain. But, with our more modern understanding, including gene flow and genetic drift and mutations, these forces of randomness, evolution as a whole seems to be a little more random at the large scale, right? Like, yes, there can be some trends within natural selection and sexual selection, but we have 3 mechanisms here, always at work, that really don't have any trends. So are we always getting better? Not necessarily. Right? We do tend to see more of a randomness than more of a quote-unquote bettering of any sort. Right? This is very big picture, very large scale. That's just where evolution takes us, according to these 5 mechanisms. So that's our conclusion. That's it for review. We'll see you back with the 6th and final lesson to go over some additional practice. A practice problem set coming up next. See you then.